And hello once again YouTube. So this is part 2 of the video of replacing my main shaft auger bearing, and that I'm going to tell you what happened. So I done a spray paint job. I spray painted all my my inside my impeller. Everything's back together now, but inside the impeller, you see I used it today, so a little bit of the paint come off, say, on that housing around your impeller. But the spray paint job, pretty good job on the blades and everything. So and the chute here. So when I done the bearing and back, the bearing come right on out. It was actually hard to get the bearing, but the bearing, the ball bearings fell out, but the inner race or whatever, he was stuck onto the shaft, so I had to. I never had a bearing puller, so I used a grinder and grinded off the shaft that's there onto the buggy wheel, the one inside that goes onto the friction wheel that's in behind all this. Down in behind here, there's a friction wheel that the belt goes around. So when I used the blower, I found that I still had a bit of noise. The slackness was gone out of this, like I said in part 1. The slackness was gone. It's still a little bit slack, but not like it was before. So you could tell the bearing, the bearing was replaced. So, but the noise was still there. So then, I come back in, and I took this screw off, 12mm that holds on your worm drive for your chute mover, and then I took the chute off. There's 3 10s or 3 12s there, I think. I took them off pretty quick. Then I took these off. These are 10mm. They're 12s. They're 10s. I took them off, 1, 2, and 2 more on the other side. Took the casing off, and I adjusted the pulley. That when you engage your drive or your auger, when you engage, you'll notice the one that comes over on top of your belt. That's the one. I used a 12mm. Socket, and I loosened it off, pushed it over to its full maximum, and then the belt then was fully tight. I never ever done work on the belt before, so it didn't look loose, but I guess that's where majority of the sound was coming from. So this is what I found. So I got rid of the sound. It was a non-tensioned belt, and so I brought over the pulley on top of the belt a little further. And it seemed to make a difference. It's hard to really judge it by eye, because I guess that belt really do need to be a tight, or whatever the case. And I never did replace any of the belts. I just replaced the bearing. The bearing was in rough shape. I had to use a grinder to grind it off the shaft, because, like I said, I didn't have a bearing puller. So that was the hardest part of the job. Reassemble was okay. I found it hard getting the bottom bolts back in. Down on the bottom, I found it hard to get in because I had a lot of them tightened up. So then I went over and put them all back in, not so tight, and then done the bottom ones. And the machine, like, she lined up her holes a little better. If you really had a lot of trouble, I guess you could take your buggy wheels off and your track, which is a bit of work too, but it's not too bad. But I got all the bolts back in after I loosened up the bolts. So one idea: don't tighten up all your bolts, your 10 bolts. Your 10 12mm bolts that holds the case together, and that's one tip there. But yeah, like, I'm very happy now. She goes out down, and I engaged her, and the sound is absolutely perfect. Like I said, my 2 belts I noticed were in good shape. So, well, I had everything apart like I did in part 1. I spray painted all, which I'm just telling you again, and I'm very happy now. She's all spray painted. That helped with rust. She's got her all greased in underneath here, underneath this ring gear, whatever you want to call it around here, that she's greased underneath, and then she's greased on top. And a better look at that grease nipple I had in the video 1. That's the grease nipple right there. You can see him. He's installed on that right transmission. All right. So that's the maintenance that I had to do. I noticed, like I said, a bad noise in her, and my shaft, my auger shaft, main shaft bearing was in hard shape, and I replaced it, but it never took care of the sound. So the sound was major. The sound, if you get a big squelching noise, I think I've identified that the belt is loose. So I guess with the amount of torque that the Honda puts out, when there's a loose belt, when she needs to be almost right on. If not, that little bit of slackness, she'll ride the edges, and she'll cause a nice bit of sound there. So now she sounds perfect, and that's about it for this video here now. Like I say, I got that grease nipple installed. I'm very happy with that on the right transmission, sub-transmission. The big thing with that is when I put her away this year or beginning of next year, I'll pack that right full of grease, and I don't think I'm ever going to have an issue there again if it keeps that full of grease. But yeah, so thanks a lot. I hope this can solve that big noise you get when you engage your impeller. I hope that you'll do your belt first. I guess I learned to listen to. I done my belt, but while you got all that, if you got a breaker and two to do that bearing, also check on the bearing. And if your bearing is bad, it's a good time to replace it. If you don't have a bearing puller, a good tip is to just use a grinder and a zip cut. I used on a 4.5 inch grinder and grinded it down on one side, grinded it on the other, hit it with the hammer, it come right off. Then I had to file down around the shaft a bit to get the new bearing right in place pretty good, but it did go on pretty good. I greased that all up, packed a little bit of grease in there, and it's all good. So I'm happy with my Honda. She's ready we just had a record snowfall of 80 centimeters here in St. John's, Newfoundland. So she went through that, and I've done a few driveways. Beforehand while she had that squelching noise. So now she's in tip-top shape, and I got a couple contract driveways I do up the road. So she's ready to go. All right, have a good day, and thanks a lot for watching the video.